Hey guys, my name is Dr. Penny Stack, and I'm here with April Tate.
We are so glad you've joined us today as we dive into all things educate to advocate for you, your family, children, and community.
Real talk for real life to support your journey.
So, how did we get here?
Over 30 years as an occupational therapist, growing up with undiagnosed dyslexia, raising a child with dyslexia, I founded Dyslexia Center of Tulsa, and after working with hundreds of children, I realized I just didn't want another child to grow up with the same struggles that I had experienced, or parents reaching out for help without any resources to be found.
Walking this path with my children opened my eyes to the loneliness that can come with this journey. I realized no one should do this alone. I founded Drops of Hope Consulting to walk with families through evaluations, therapies, 504s, IEPs, the joys, the struggles, and everything in between.
We met, and it was a perfect fit.
Chatting over a cup of coffee and way too much chocolate, Educate to Advocate was born.
Understanding the tears and celebrating the wins from our hearts to your home. Well, welcome to the Educate to Advocate podcast. I'm Dr. Penny Stack.
And I'm April Tate.
We have an amazing guest today to share with you. We have Sarah Van Alstine from the Oklahoma Occupational Therapy Association. Sarah is an advocate who works with people of all ages to accomplish their goals through occupational therapy, helping them find resources and helping change policy on local and state levels. Sarah knows the challenges caregivers face, struggling through the system to find answers for their loved ones. Sometimes she's a diplomat, other times she's more of a mama bear. She has children with learning differences and family with chronic health conditions. She's also experienced advocating both personally and professionally. Sarah's a local girl. She grew up in Texas, but has lived in Oklahoma since 2005. She's been an occupational therapist for 20 years, graduating from Texas Women's University in 2001, and currently works as an independent contractor with students in school settings and in pediatric clinics. Sarah has worked in acute neuro rehab with adults recovering from spinal cord injury and head injuries, a post-joint replacement surgeries and chronic pain management. She really enjoyed doing hippotherapy, OT on horseback. Like, who would not enjoy that? Okay, back to her bio. That was just kind of neat to read. Sarah started volunteering with the State Professional Association in 2012 and has been Oklahoma Occupational Therapy Association president for the past 4 years. In that time, she built a new website, recruited candidates for the Medical Board Advisory Committee, developed the state annual conference for occupational therapy providers for multiple years, and even authored legislation to add telehealth into state law for occupational therapists, for occupational therapy practitioners and occupational therapy services. Sarah's received multiple awards for service and was nominated OT of the Year in 2020 by the Oklahoma Occupational Therapy Association. Sarah volunteers all year long to coordinate advocacy efforts for the state capitol among state agencies and with other professional organization leaders to increase access to healthcare and healthcare services across the state. And there's some additional information I'd like to share with you about Sarah. She loves sharing how awesome occupational therapy is as a profession, globally impacting lives in a wide variety of ways, and how she values occupational therapy personally. She loves reading neuroscience articles for fun. This is why I think I love her so much, and learning about biology and mental health and cognition. Multiple family members have had health conditions that keep this topic near and dear to her heart. Sarah also loves learning a little something about everything. It's an easier way to share interests with her clients and finding common ground with political leaders as she's advocating for policy reform. Like, I just feel so honored that she's here with us today.
Yes.
Sarah, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
We are so glad that you're here. So, the Oklahoma Occupational Therapy Association, can you share with us a little bit about what that is with our listeners?
Sure. And thanks again for having me today to talk about the OT Association and then advocacy in general. So the occupational therapy profession has a national association, AOTA, And then OKOTA is the state affiliate. So we provide similar advocacy efforts, but at the state level. And then primarily, we're the ones that advocate for our profession, regulatory and local. We do a lot of local advocacy for OT so that our scope of practice stays safe and that we can add, as technology advances like telehealth, that we can add services into our State Practice Act. And then we're also keeping an eye on industry so that if there's a service area that occupational therapy jobs could be increased, then we work to do that. And then also to increase the number of students that are able to go into programs for OTA and OT careers.
I remember you sharing with us earlier that OKOTA is comprised of about 250 active professional members. And that group really is are the ones who makes the decision and represents 2,500 licensed occupational therapy practitioners in the state of Oklahoma to accomplish advocacy, like an example that you said, passing the telehealth legislation, uh, being included in mental health reimbursement. And this is just one example of why you would want to join your state association, particularly OKOTA. But can you give us a little more information about maybe who else would like to join the association?
Sure, we have an associate membership level that we have had educators, physicians, nurses, people who are community advocates can join as an associate. It's only $15 for the whole year. They're accessing our newsletters so they can find out what legislation or what local ordinances that we're working towards, either supporting or hoping to amend. And then, really how occupational therapy is growing and working in our communities in different ways, whether it's a homeless program or offering services in community settings or hospital based or home health, whatever it is where occupational therapy is happening. We want to update our members and also people that are serving those communities in different ways so we can work together as a team and get more done that way.
So, for anybody that might be interested in joining OKOTA, you can learn more about them at okota.org. On their website, there's also a phone number if you just want to speak with somebody. Sometimes we just like to make that connection and talk to a person. There's also a link to their upcoming meetings, and everyone is welcome to join their meetings just to learn more about the profession and also access the quarterly newsletter.
Yes.
So, advocacy, that's a big word. And that's actually in our podcast name, right? Educate to advocate. So, this is kind of a really good marriage. And advocacy can be very overwhelming and very daunting if you're new. And today we really just want to pull back the curtain and unveil and dive into that the steps and kind of what's involved in advocacy, why it's important. It's not something to be terrified about. And we're really wanting to share this in hopes to generate interest among other occupational therapy practitioners in the state of Oklahoma, as well as parents who may have children that are receiving occupational therapy services or adults that may be recipients or caregivers that have family members that are recipients of occupational therapy services. Advocacy keeps occupational therapy relevant and current, especially in these changing times, but also other businesses. There may be business owners that are affiliated with occupational therapy as well, and how each have a role and a voice that should be heard in advocacy and when it comes to legislation and making sure that we are moving in the direction to best serve our community. So with that said, I really want to turn this over to April, and you had some questions about advocacy that I'd love you to share.
I do. So let's start by just talking about what are the different kinds of ways that we can advocate. It's such a big word, and I feel like sometimes it's overwhelming just to take on the title or the role of somebody who wants to advocate for change. And in my mind, whenever I see advocate, I see somebody who is, passionate and ready to make a change. And they get in their car and they drive to the Capitol and they say their speech and they're confident and they're comfortable. And I didn't have that experience whenever I gave that a try. I found it really overwhelming. So I wanted to start out by asking you, Sarah, could you just tell us some different ways that you can advocate? It doesn't have to be, Aaron Brockovich level speeches. And, it doesn't have to be that big. It can be, a phone call or an email.
Yes, absolutely. And so there's two parts of this. So I'm coming at it from the parent angle, and then also as the president of OKOTA professionally. So let me start as the parent level, because I thought, since I had been an occupational therapist for years, when I became a mom and ended up needing to advocate for their medical needs or their access to school accommodations, whatever it ended up being, that I thought, I'm going to be able to do this. I know what to do. I've helped other families do this. But it's completely different when it's your own child.
That's so true.
They're in a different way, and everything that you're trying to do is very personal when it's your own kids. So that was a very good learning experience, though, for me, because I had a little bit more empathy, and I thought I already had it for my families I was working with as an OT. But then to understand that this is 24/7. It's not just when I'm seeing them in clinic or answering emails, but it was a 24/7 thing to advocate for your kiddo. So that's one angle, but that involves phone calls and emails to teachers, or it involves hunting for a doctor who will get you the answers that you need medically. And so those are some phone calls and emails advocacy that parents tend to have to learn how to do. And if you're not comfortable with that, then that's a whole other skill set to develop, just on top of parenting someone with special needs, is advocating for them through the healthcare system with insurance, or finding the right providers or the right tutors or the right school help. And so I'm thankful to know that there are parent advocates to help in the school system, because that's a whole area of advocacy that's definitely needed. And then as the OKOTA president, thankfully I'd had a little bit of experience with parental rights advocacy and some education topics like dyslexia and some other learning differences. So I wasn't a stranger to going to the Capitol, but I definitely hadn't done anything on my own. And so as the OKOTA president, we didn't have the funds for a lobbyist for the first several years. So because I'm passionate about this, I decided to learn how to do it, and found a mentor and talked to my own senator from my local area. And she is thankfully very involved in autism advocacy and passing some insurance regulations to get reimbursement for services for autism. And that was one of the stepping stones that I took to learn how to advocate at a big macro kind of a level. And thankfully, I had other moms and other families and other providers who were involved in similar advocacy efforts. I learned that there were days at the Capitol that anybody can go. And so there's a Disability Advocates Day, there's an Autism Awareness Day, there are all kinds of days where you can just go and be a part of a big group and learn who of the senators and representatives are invested in that particular topic. So that's a really simple way that families can look on online and see when Capitol Days are coming for their area of advocacy interest. And that's an easy way to start going up to the Capitol, so that it becomes more familiar to you. And once you've been there a few times, it's a really beautiful building, but it's not quite as overwhelming. Once you've been in there and you know who you're going to go talk to, it's another office building. It's a really pretty one, but it's just another office building if you've already been there and established those patterns and routines of going. So once you get started, it's easier.
Well, thank you for that encouragement, because I was talking earlier with Penny, and I was telling her how like you as a parent, I was like, oh, I've got this, I can do it. And I was really interested in learning how to advocate at the legislative level. And so I signed up for a conference and learned all of the things that I thought I needed to know. And then we went up as a big group and they dropped us off. And then once I got into the building and I started going from office to office, I was so overwhelmed. I felt unimportant. I felt like what I had to say was just not as important as what other people had to say. I wasn't coming at this from a professional standpoint, and I felt like I was just a little fish in a giant pond. And I really left that day. I mean, I learned a lot. I typically will take some learning points, and so I can lean on that. But I left really overwhelmed and just thinking, this is not my realm. I can't do this. I can't make a difference at that level on my own. So I love that you encourage people to go back, because I didn't. I was like, good. But I love that you can encourage people to go back, and I likely will. But it's very overwhelming as a parent, from my perspective, to think that you can make those big changes that we want to see, that we want to make, whenever you're dealing with these people who you just feel like you're just not in that league.
Sarah, you had mentioned when you had the mentor and you teamed up with your own local representative. Do you remember off the top of your head? And I may be putting you on the spot, and it's okay if you don't remember because I'll look it up and post it if we don't remember. But I believe there is an app that lists all the representatives in the state of Oklahoma, and you can look them up and you can see what their interests are, if they've authored any bills, what they're supporting. And that is that's a great resource, especially if you just kind of have that feeling of being overwhelmed, where at least you can learn in the comfort of your own home and yoga pants of what's going on in the world and kind of make notes and feel brave to maybe make a phone call. Do you remember the name of that app? And if you do, could you share that with us?
Yes. So it is free. So I don't think I'll get in trouble for supporting an app from my position as OKOTA president. I have to be careful I'm not endorsing something, but it's a free app and it's by the state electrical co-op. And so if you go into where you buy your apps, then you can search for the 58th legislature of Oklahoma, and it should pop up that particular app. And so if somebody really wants to find it later and they can't, feel free to email you guys at Educate to Advocate or send you a message, or also at okota.org, and we can help you find those. You can go to the website for the state legislature and type in Find My Legislator, Oklahoma. And that will send you to the website for the government page for the Senate and the House. And just by your address, they'll tell you who your local representative is and your local senator. It's not your U.S. senator or your U.S. rep. It'll be your local one. And then speaking of finding out who those people are, honestly, aside from the app that will show you their picture and tell you who their executive assistant is, it will also be good for you to Facebook or Instagram search, because honestly, that's a really good way to find out what their interests are. There's usually a professional page, like Senator so-and-so's Facebook page, but then they'll also have a personal one. And a lot of times they'll keep those public because they want their constituents to know who they are and what they're involved in. So either of those, Facebook, Twitter, a lot of the legislators are on Twitter. So even if you don't have it and you've never really used it, if you would like to become more involved in advocacy, most of the politicians and state leaders are on Twitter.
Good to know. It's a good little nugget. Yeah. And so one of the things that you had shared, we talk about the membership, right? There's 250 members in OKOT. I just keep coming back to that because I'm having a hard time getting my head wrapped around the disproportionate amount of load of work. Is that 1%, 10%? I'm really bad at math. 250 from, okay.
It's not, whatever the percentage is, we need more.
It's tiny, right? And so that's a big lift. And, the state association is doing such a great job of keeping it relevant, making sure our services are reimbursable. So everybody that's working in the state of Oklahoma as an OT practitioner benefits from all of this legislative work and advocacy that OKOTA does. And one of the things I think I remember you sharing with us when we were speaking earlier was communication. And
yes,
just being part of that bigger group will, one, kind of take care of what you were sharing with us, April, that apprehension of where do I start? I'm overwhelmed, because now you can just have somebody hold your hand and bring you under their wing, and you can be part of the process and do a little step in the process. And just also, I think, Sarah, you were sharing a little bit about not feeling alone and isolated. So do you have, in your experience, any stories that you can share with us when you may have had a new member come on, or you recruited, or somebody recruited a new member, where you kind of took them through that process and helped them, and in turn that helped the cause?
Yeah. So can I bring you into this?
Yeah. So as that was coming out of my mouth, I realized I was probably opening up that box. But yeah, go ahead.
Just because, we're here and we're talking. So I thought of you first.
Sure.
And because dyslexia was a big topic, for us personally, but also professionally. you contacted me and said you wanted to get more involved. You really had a heart for advocacy, but you weren't sure where to go. And well, there's a bill going through the legislature right now. And if you'd like to go up and share some information to that bill author, I think we could have an impact on how occupational therapy is included, because it wasn't being included. And so I thought, rather than me doing it just by myself or having a form letter sent out to the membership, let me show Penny how to do this. And then let's see if we can do more together. And sure enough,
I said no. My first answer was no. No.
Never take no from her. She doesn't take no from anyone else.
I don't usually take no for answer. So we worked on it together. And I remember thinking that she had the best shoes. I mean, she just dressed up, and we went to the Capitol together. And then Penny, will you tell kind of your side of that experience? But we went together. And so I think that helped.
We did.
You had somebody.
You literally held my hand. I'm pretty sure your hand was physically holding my hand. Like I don't think it's figuratively. Like I think literally that's what happened. But I was terrified, did not know what to do. And I go in there with you, Sarah, and you knew everybody. And hearing you share your story earlier, how you really just kind of taught yourself and dove right in. You finally get to this point where you get to know what everybody needs. I really felt like a fish out of water, but you made it not so scary. And you really broke it down to what it is we needed to do, what our mission was, who we needed to talk to. And the app that you shared earlier was very helpful, finding out who cared about what. But I will tell you, and I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, my biggest memory from that and what impacted me the most, and what I share with my students when I'm talking about advocacy and legislation and all of that stuff. So I remember when we went to the governor's office, and I was just like terrified, but just like you, like,
right?
There's all these smart people and big people, and I'm just like nobody.
Exactly.
Right? And we're giving them our information. We're passing out our information to several offices. Sarah had asked me a day or two before, and I'm just copying all the stuff and putting it together. And I'm just handing out packets. And in my mind, no one's really reading this or listening to it, right? And within less than 24 hours, the governor calls Sarah and says, we need more information. We're interested. And I think at the time, if my memory serves right, we were looking for me to have a seat on a committee that was making legislation about how dyslexia would be served in the state. And that particular seat had qualification requirements that I did not particularly possess, but we thought that it might be close enough we'd give it a try. And so the governor went to bat and really wanted to do this. And he looked in the legal aspects of, can we get this done? But my biggest takeaway was when we got the phone call saying, we can't do it because Dr. Stack doesn't meet these particular criteria. I saw that as a huge win. And the reason I saw that as a huge win was I was just blown away that in 24 hours, the governor knew what occupational therapy was, saw that it belonged in this field, and went to bat for us, that we were on the map. And in my mind, that was the biggest takeaway of that event.
It was really nice to see that happen as quickly as it did. Sometimes advocacy takes years, and sometimes it is discouraging to not have the results when you need them. But every effort that we make makes a difference.
They're building blocks.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. And I think that's the other thing I learned from you is you may not get a yes that day. And you may not get a yes.
Ever.
That's legislative session. But what Sarah has done, and she has done so well in representing our state association, is they know at the Capitol who she is. They know who our association is. And this is a little sidebar, but I'm really hopeful that the legacy that you've developed when you move on, that this will just continue to perpetuate when the next president takes over and we continue to evolve, because you've done such a good job with that, Sarah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We are recruiting, we're training. Occupational therapy profession is full of people who are passionate about helping others. And we're in contact with families and caregivers and other professional providers who are just as passionate about advocacy. And so I really want to increase our connections and grow those relationships so that we can get more done. I'm kind of I love to get things done. And I had a friend tell me recently, she said, "You're always busy." I said, "I know." And she goes, "You get a lot done, but you're still busy." I said, "I know. I tend to cross one thing off my list and there's five others to replace it. So I need to work on recruiting more people into the different areas." But that's part of why I'm here too, to talk about membership, because I would love to have more members. When the number goes up, then we have more funds to be able to hire more assistants, and then we can get more accomplished. But also, because we have new members that come on board, and I didn't know that they had already accomplished some amazing thing. And so when I learn about what they're doing, then the association grows its reach, and what we can get done together. And then also we have professionals who will mentor the new grads and the students that are coming in, and who can build relationships with the other professions, the medical equipment providers, the teachers, all the people that work together. If we can grow that community of helpers and advocates, we could get so much more done.
I agree with you 100%. Sharing this story brings me into our next topic. And that is, when you're advocating, bringing that very personal story, so our legislators, they feel, I always tell people, I know this may sound really weird, but make me cry. And I don't mean like hurt me, but I mean, make me feel what you feel, because people don't always remember what you tell them, but they remember how you made them feel. And if you left that emotional impact, the likelihood of the legislator thinking about that when they are voting on something that is of interest to you is much higher. Can you share a little bit more about your experience with those types of situations?
Yeah, I'll refer back to what we were up there for with the dyslexia handbook. And so, even though we didn't at the time get occupational therapy included in that particular item, the senators and the representatives who were on the education committees remembered, and they knew that you were a resource. So you received, and thank you for CCing me, but you received several emails requesting information about that general topic, because it's going to be something that we have to continue to advocate for, unfortunately, but at least it is something we're working on now, and more is being done every year. They knew that you were a resource, and so that was amazing. That is carrying forward, like you said, a legacy. But the contacts that you make, and then the personal stories that they remember, even if they're not elected for another term and there's another person that goes into that spot, you've made that impact, and that those resources are available to the committee members who deal with that topic. And so building personal relationships with the legislators is important, but also learning the systems so that you stay involved. Because if you just go up one time on one day, you may do one thing. But as you continue to be involved in the process, your reach grows, and your power of your voice grows.
Can you, I know that's big,
I
isn't
like
it?
that. Yeah,
It
and
is.
I wanted to add something too. While I was there, and I was completely unbrave and overwhelmed, and all of the things that I've already laid out before you. Um, Something that was told to me while I was there by a representative. She was super kind, and I went in and I was so uncomfortable, and I was shaky and nervous to be talking to this person. But I started with, "Well, I'm just a mom, but," and she said, "Stop right there. You are not just a mom," and I might cry. Because it was so, I did leave feeling impacted that, you aren't just a mom. You are a story. You're a life. You're the mother of a child who is alive, who's going to have a future. And, just those personal stories, it really made a big impact on me that she said, "No, you never say that you're just a mom, because you matter." And so I want our listeners to feel that impact, that if you're afraid, like I am, or you're not taking that next step, just always have that voice in the back of your mind that you're good enough, you're big enough. Just because you're a mom doesn't mean that you're not qualified to go and tell your story.
And honestly, I've had legislators specifically say they listen to parents, they listen to their constituents with a greater respect for the stories that they hear from families and from their voters than the lobbyists who are paid to be there to work for an industry. Those people have a reason to be there and they have professional resources. You're a voter, you're a constituent, and most of the legislators have a family member or a loved one who's been impacted by something that when you find out who has a passion for a certain area, that's a connection that you can have that goes beyond any paid lobbyist or professional. But that personal relationship really does make a difference because they value your lived experience. That's a phrase I know Penny loves to use.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
Can you share the story about the parent that has advocated for her child for changing tables? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So I'm old enough to recall when we didn't have changing tables or nursing areas anywhere, unless it was a kind of a boutique place. And in most restaurants, most public accommodations now have a changing table somewhere. I think we should lobby to have those in more places, but it is better than it used to be. And so the next step, we've been supporting a bill that recently it didn't make it through the next phase of the legislature. So we're going to work harder to support the author of the bill if it comes up again next session, and I hope it does. There's a mom who has a child with a physical limitation that no longer can use those regular changing tables as he gets bigger. They're really just meant for infants and maybe small toddlers. So now that he's getting a little bit older and has medical needs that require him to have a safe place to be changed or to handle, bowel bladder schedules, they need to have a place to go. And even at the Capitol, even after the renovations that have gone at our state capitol, there's not an adult changing area in many places. There's only one, and it's in a restricted area, so you have to give them advance notice that you're going to be there if you need to use it. And that's not really a universally accessible place for adults and for older kids to be able to go to the bathroom. And so if we want to encourage people to be an advocate and be able to talk to their legislators, then there needs to be a universal changing table at our Capitol, and especially there, but also in state buildings and state parks, places where we want people to be able to go no matter what their physical needs are. So it's Max's Law is the name for it. And then the mama is Audra Beasley. So if you're interested in that topic, then you'll hear about it with OKOTA updates on our Facebook page. But also, if there's a kind of a relationship that you have with people in your community, whether you know them from church or the neighborhood or school, and you know that they're advocating for something and you want to know how to help them, just ask if they are working on something, because I think it's really important to join together for advocacy. It's a lot easier to be with someone else to do it, but also you can learn things from what they've been through. I mean, this mama has been through a lot, and she has learned a lot in the last several years. She's a wealth of knowledge about advocacy efforts locally for city ordinances and building codes, things that she probably never thought she would need to know about. But as a mom advocate, that's what she's doing. So that's an inspirational story I wanted to share. That even though we haven't seen that law pass through to the governor's desk yet, that will continue to support things like that affect all of us.
What are the top issues that OKOTA are advocating for currently in our legislature?
So at the moment, we're watching legislation go through on a variety of topics because, as you know, occupational therapy, we work with all ages. And so whether it's mental health, behavioral health, physical disabilities, access to services, there's a variety. So thankfully, we now have a lobbyist, and she also works for the Speech Therapy Association. So there's a lot of crossover in the bills that we're looking at. But we focus on protecting our scope of practice and then also trying to increase access to healthcare services. And so one of the big topics this session is the managed care proposal for OHCA. Currently, they're talking about awarding what's called MCOs to manage the Medicaid funds for the state, and that will impact a variety of programs, mostly pediatric services, but also with us, the state just passing Medicaid expansion. There are a lot more adults who will be impacted by this as well. And so we're watching to see what's going to be announced, how this works. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, and we've had dozens and dozens of phone calls from members and non-members uh, wanting to know what's going to happen to their business, because if they provide services and their reimbursement rates change or their credentialing changes, they need to know what the plan is going to be moving forward so they can keep their businesses running, and so that they know how to help their families navigate paperwork and the change in how reimbursement is done. And so using the contacts that we have through our lobbyists, we're asking leadership at OHCA to provide a Zoom presentation to do a Q&A for our members. So if you're not already a member of OKOTA, join today, and then you'll have access to the Zoom call that we're hoping to set up in the next 2 or 3 weeks with leadership at OHCA to talk about what we don't know and what rumors we're hearing, and what's really going to happen going forward, and how we can plan ahead to keep our companies moving forward in the right direction. Um, there was a Zoom call with some concerned business owners last week, and they weren't all therapy providers, but they were clinic managers who needed to know, about the business aspect of it, the billing and coding, the paperwork requirements, and everything that was up in the air seemingly right now. So if we can get some answers and help facilitate that kind of question and answer with the state agency and the business owners and the therapy providers, and I think we will have done, a great service to bring people together, because it's not helpful when there are unanswered questions, especially when it involves so many people in the state.
How do OKOTA and our National Association, American Occupational Therapy Association, and AOTA, how do they interface to support each other's uh, top lobbying needs?
Right. So, as president, I'm on a group of the state association presidents. They call it the ASAP group. But we meet and we talk about, and this is another thing about advocacy and being with a group instead of on your own. I learned so much from the annual training sessions that AOTA puts out each year at the annual conference. The other presidents, the past presidents, the ones who are coming in, mentor each other. And then throughout the year, we email when there's a question, and then you get at least 40, if not 51, answers to your question. And there are resources. People have already done this. They've been through this already, or they didn't even know they needed to know that. And so then we have resources that we're sharing from each state, and then also nationally organizing resources for us. And so recently I volunteered to be on a committee to update our affiliate agreements or a contract from the state to the National Association. So we updated our affiliate agreement, and it'll be really exciting to see how that relationship grows, because previously, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 3 years ago, Penny, do you know that Hawaii hadn't licensed CODAs yet?
That's
It
right.
was very, very recently that hadn't happened yet. And so we're thinking, occupational therapy has been around over 100 years. So why did it take so long for some of the states to have the same legal standards as others? But we're just providing services, and until reimbursement requires something, or until the state regulatory agency says, oh, we need to be, like this other state, then we just move forward with what we know, the best we know, and then we keep learning. But it wasn't that long ago. And so it's kind of mind-boggling how fast technology has advanced in the last 5 years, and then how that's included communication between other states. So there's a lot more communication between the presidents now than there was 20 years ago, for sure. And I think that means we can share resources and help each other out with legislative advocacy. The National Association right now is promoting an interstate compact licensure, so that several states can work together so that we can cross state lines with telehealth more easily. That one particular state will accept licensure from other states and just expedite the paperwork so much faster, which is nice. We're a really mobile society these days, and so I think that will help us to move the red tape a little bit.
I can tell just from everything we've been talking about that OKOTA is doing a lot of meaningful work. Can you share with us the open positions as far as board positions that you're recruiting for, and maybe some committee opportunities for people who may be current members and just want to refresh, or our listeners who are not members but might be interested?
Absolutely. We have elections coming up this spring, and right now is the time to contact our office if you're interested in being a board member. That means you get to vote and help direct our strategic plan for the year with things that you're very interested in that you want to support. We have 5 different positions available on the ballot, and we can give you information about those roles, and it's on our website too. Then we have appointments to different committee chairperson roles. We have the continuing education committee, and we have a lot of ideas, but we need a point person who will take that idea and put it on the calendar and then let people know about it, help us kind of organize that continuing education component. One of the missions of the OT Association is to provide quality professional development in the state. And so we have speakers that are available, but we need to get the times and the dates organized and whether we're going to only do it virtually or if we're going to be able to record it and sell it later, all those little details. But it's a team effort. We just need a point person in that role to help us move forward with our plans for this year and next. Usually committee chairs volunteer for a year, but we have people in training throughout, a couple of months here, a different year there, just depending on what your schedule is like. And then we try to do as many team projects as possible so that it doesn't just fall on one person's shoulders. The more we have volunteers working on something, the better, because then we can share those roles and responsibilities and mentor the new members so that they can find out what their real interests are in the association, what they'd like to work on as their goal for the year.
One last question. You were like, didn't we cover this? What is the number one thing that licensed occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants in the state of Oklahoma can do to support OKOTA?
Become a member and also contact us when there is something that you're seeing that you think needs to be changed or that you're concerned about or that you want to promote. Help us to be involved in that because you're our eyes and ears in the community. You are there in your practice setting. And I have a little bit of an insight into pediatrics because of where I work as a paid job. My volunteer role as president is separate, but I'm trying to learn as much as I can about a variety of areas. But I'm not the expert in acute hospitals in Oklahoma right now, or inpatient psych settings. Those are some areas I need people who will help me know what's happening or how the OT Association needs to support those providers in those settings. So the more members that we have, the more tools we have, the more experts we have available for resources. If there's a bill that comes up on something that I think impacts our scope of practice, I need to know who I can talk to give me those details, or who I can have a senator call and get specific information from about that. So the more active members that we have, the more contacts we have, the more resources that we have. And when we have our increased membership dues, which are really affordable per person, but if we could get 100 more members, we'd be able to do so much more with advocacy efforts each year. So it just means more help, more services when we have more members who join.
I remember recently, within the past year, one of the feelers you put out there, you wanted to know the caseload for school-based OTs or OTAs. And there was discussion about maybe coming up with a process to make those caseloads manageable. But the original call was, hey, let us know what caseload you have. And so I think it's really important to just kind of just say out loud that if you are not a member of OKOTA, we still want to hear your voice. We still want you to come to us. We want you to be a member, but you're not obligated to be a member to share any questions or concerns you have about your practice. We are still representing occupational therapy in the state of Oklahoma.
I think Oklahoma may be, if not the only one of a few who even support non-members in advocacy efforts specifically. I've had phone calls from people who weren't a member, but we still addressed their need. And that, even if you call the National Association, the first thing they ask you is, what is your membership number?
Right.
And so that was something that was important to me, especially because we don't have a high percentage of the licensed practitioners as active members yet, that we're available for them and that they know what we're here for. And so that hopefully that will encourage active membership in more of the providers as they see the benefit to membership.
My biggest takeaway from this conversation, first of all, I'm looking at the time, realizing this is probably our longest podcast ever.
I think so.
So that's because this is great information, right? But one of the biggest takeaways I think I've taken, and Sarah, thank you for the reminder, because we all need to be reminded, is stay the course. The turtle can win the race, and it's planting the seed, it's consistency. Join a group so fear does not overtake you.
Right.
That's my big takeaway. April?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. Really, it inspired me to kind of put my legislative high heels, from the back of the closet. Maybe it's time to put them at the front of the closet and start thinking about becoming more active and kind of facing that and becoming a little bit more brave in those areas, because it's important what we have to say. And just, it's so inspiring to meet people like you who are not afraid to take those dives, that are not afraid to run those things down. And I was really thinking about when you said, stay the course. I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe this isn't a problem that's fixed for me. Maybe it's not a problem that's fixed for my child, but maybe it's a problem that's fixed for my grandkid if we keep going. And so just to be forward looking and not get discouraged when we're doing this, and just keep the big picture in mind. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually the difference will be made.
Well, you heard it here, folks. And what I heard was that apparently Educate to Advocate is going to the Capitol.
Oh, dear.
And Sarah's coming with us.
Yeah, she's got to come.
She's got to come. Right. So thank you so much. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your information with us. I really appreciate, I always learn something from you, and I appreciate all your time and everything that you're sharing with occupational therapy practitioners in the state, and for everything that you do. I want to say on the record that I know for a fact you can easily spend 40 hours a week as the president of OKOTA doing what it takes to do it. And you do that all as a volunteer. This is not a big paid position. And just on behalf of all OT practitioners in the state of Oklahoma, I just want to publicly say thank you so much for everything that you do.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. This was such a great conversation, and we appreciate your time. We hope that we leave you today feeling empowered to advocate. Thank you for making us a small part of your day.
We would love to hear from you. What's on your mind? Feel free to email us at educatetoadvocate@gmail.com, and your topic might be on our next podcast.
Connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. You can also download any of our podcasts. Download, like, subscribe, please, on any podcast platform, and find us on our new YouTube channel.